Guys, welcome to week 3. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah? How are you guys doing with your draft of your first presentation?
All right, pretty all right.
Yeah.
I've mostly just been doing all the research right now.
Okay, that's great. That's huge. LaShawn, you say you're doing okay? You guess? All right. So, today we're going to talk about the content of your presentation. If you guys have any questions as we're going along, please don't hesitate to interrupt me or say something or any of those things. And as we go along, I will be asking you to participate, so don't leave your computer. We are here. I do have 7 people registered to show up today, so we may have people show up as the lecture continues, and that's awesome. When you see them show up, go ahead and welcome them here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about content. We're talking about the and when I say content, I'm talking about the actual words that you're saying, the message of the speech. And there are 3 things that we want to think about when we're thinking about what we are saying, that message of the speech. First, we want that focus on the audience. So, Tess and LaShawn, do you guys remember what Nancy Duarte talks about with focusing on the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah? What'd she say?
Pop
Focus
quiz. On the audience, speak to them, eye contact, don't look down, speak to your audience.
Oh, yeah, all of those things. And what about when we're talking about the message? What do you guys remember what she says about the message? And the audience?
A little bit.
Yeah? LaShawn, you say make sure it stands out. Absolutely. Yeah. And we really want to make sure that our audience is the hero of this story. So as we are crafting these presentations, we want to make sure that our audience is the main character, the hero, and we are there to help them along their journey. So we're really focusing on what we can do to help them succeed. All right? When we're thinking about content, we really want to think about telling stories. I like this quote. It says, "My story is of such marvel that if it were written with a needle on the corner of an eye, it would yet serve as a lesson to those who seek wisdom." I think that's a beautiful quote. So why do you think we're going to talk about using stories in content? What do you think? LaShawn and Tess, you guys are the 2 folks here. Oh, Kayla, you made it. Glad you're here. Welcome, Kayla. So why do you think we're going to... Okay, go on.
It's relatable.
Yeah? How do stories make things relatable?
It humanizes you and connects you with another person.
Yeah, absolutely.
They get to see things from your perspective and hear things from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stories help us, they help us relate. You're totally right. You agree, LaShawn? Awesome. And then stories, a lot of times when stories are really specific, we see ourselves in the details of other people's stories, and that's something that I think is really cool. I'd like you guys to remember. And then finally, as we're talking about these presentations, I want to make sure this third part remains at the top of your mind. We want to think about showing as opposed to telling. So what do you think, how do you think that applies to these presentations?
Your word can only go so far. You need to give proof. You need to give, things that people can see and hear, not only read.
Mm-hmm.
You have to apply to all the senses, not just one.
Yeah, we're absolutely wanting to appeal to as many senses as possible. That's great. LaShawn, um, by giving examples of what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So the cool thing about showing pictures is um, in fewer words, I can get everybody on the same page with one picture in a second. Whereas if I only have words, it's going to take me a lot longer to get everybody to see that specific picture. And even if we all get to a similar picture, we may not all get to the same picture. So actually showing images can make a huge difference. And then we can talk about other things or talk about larger concepts and show that one image. So we want to think about these three things. We want to think about our audience when we are developing our content. We want to think about, what was the last one? We want to think about telling stories when we're developing our content. And we want to think about making sure we're including things that we can show, or adapting our stories so we can find things that we can show. Okay? All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about structure. I have a quick video I think you guys will enjoy, and it's talking about structure. So I'm going to bring that up, and let me know if you can't hear it. So it's about a 4.5 minute video. Can you guys hear it?
Hi, my name is Tony, and this is Every Frame a Painting. So this channel's been going well, which means it's about time.
Time for a confession.
Yeah, time for a confession. I've stolen more ideas from this film than from any other.
F for fake.
F for fake.
F for fake.
Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction, this is a film about trickery and fraud, about lies.
Wait, sorry, I'm doing this wrong. Can we start over? This is an essay film by Orson Welles. It's called F for Fake, and it's one of my personal Bibles. Everything I know about editing, I learned from this film. But today, I want to talk about one basic thing: structure.
We found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it.
When you're structuring a video essay, there's one thing you really want to avoid.
Chris, I think that's about it.
And then?
No, that's it.
And then?
Then nothing else, because I'm done ordering, okay?
And then?
If you tell a story that's and then they, and then, and that, you're in big trouble.
This is the #1 mistake I make in my own work. Like here, watch how repetitive this is. Choosing to take the money, choosing not to fight back, choosing to hide their emotions, choosing not to trust someone, choosing to wait out the discomfort, choosing to get... This is a list you could put in any order. That's why it's so boring.
What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but. Right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens.
What are those? My pubes. What? I got them from Scott Tenorman.
And therefore, this happens.
Hartman, you don't buy pubes, you grow them yourself. You're telling me these pubes are worth nothing. Yeah.
But this happens.
And I'll give you the pubes.
Sweet.
Therefore, this happens.
Ah, God damn it!
So throughout this movie, Orson Welles does the exact same thing. Except he doesn't connect scenes, he connects thoughts.
You're a painter. Why do you want people to do fakes?
Because the fakes are as good as the real ones, and there's a market and there's a demand.
If you didn't have an art market, then fakers could not exist.
Even though this movie is an essay, each moment has the connective logic of a South Park episode. The second rule in this movie is to have more than one story moving in parallel.
I'll quote Hitchcock again. He said the name of making movies is Meanwhile Back at the Ranch. He's absolutely right. You want to have two things going. You reach the peak of one, you go to the other.
I hope you know what you're doing.
You pick the other up just where you want it. When it loses interest, drop it. Meanwhile, back at the ranch.
How does this work in an essay film? Well, let's say you have two stories. Let one of them build up. When it reaches peak interest, switch to the other. let this one build. And when this gets to the top, go back to the first. Simple, right? Except F for Fake doesn't just have two things. There's also stories about Orson Welles, Howard Hughes, a woman named Oya, and even the making of this movie. And by building each story carefully, Welles can jump between all 6 of these without ever losing the audience. So when I'm making a video essay, this is what's going through my head.
No ending! No ending! No ending!
And I got all of that from watching this film, which more than anything has taught me, it's not about what you get, it's how you cut it, and what comes out the other end. Remember, video essays aren't essays. They're films. So you want to structure and pace them like a filmmaker would. Therefore and but, meanwhile, back at the ranch. And if you don't believe me, at least trust Orson Welles, who somehow figured this out over 40 years ago.
Why not? I'm a charlatan.
But whatever, let's wrap up this essay.
Now it's time for an introduction.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this concludes year 1 of Every Frame a Painting. I'd like to thank you for watching.
And wish you all a very pleasant good evening.
All right. So what'd you guys get out of that? Kayla, LaShawn, Tess, what'd you guys get out of that? What surprised you the most from that video? Did anything... Well, first of all, I guess, were you able to see it?
Yeah, I was able to see it.
Okay, great. So, LaShawn, you say you got out of the video how to properly move through an essay, but in a film sense. Can you expand on that? What do you mean? How to connect each part of what you're trying to portray. Absolutely. So we're talking about, when we're talking about structure in a presentation, we are talking about how ideas connect. So, and it says up there, it's the flow of the content. So how do I go from this one fact to another story to a fact? Like how do I go from one thing to the next? And what I really would love you guys to pay attention to was one of the main things that he was focusing on is, are we talking about and then? Or are we talking about this happened and therefore this happens? So a lot of times in these presentations, we're going to be making claims. We're going to say this is true. This is a truth. So we have a choice. We can say this is a truth, and then this is a truth, and then this is a truth, or we can say this is a truth, and therefore this other truth, it's true too. But this truth over here, that truth also real, therefore this other truth. So does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like a cause and effect type ordeal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, cause and effect. Exactly. Kayla, I'm glad you could see some of it. It was skipping. Oh, that's too bad. I'll give you guys the web address for it, and then you guys can watch it on your own. So when we're thinking about our presentations, we do want to think about that this happens and therefore this happens, but we're also thinking about a 3-act structure. So what do you guys think is the 3-act structure? Before I'll show it to you in just a second. But what do you think, really simply, what do you think it is? We've talked about it before. It's in all of the assignments that we're talking about. So the first act is the beginning.
Middle, end.
And the middle and the end. Absolutely. So we're thinking about, we've got an introduction, which is where we gain trust with the audience. It's where we get to know we help them get to know us. It's where we gain camaraderie. And we've got the middle, which has the meat, the real content. So the middle is going to be much more. And then we've got the end, which is where we remind everybody what we said already. We're going, oh, by the way, this is what I said. Don't forget this. And then finally, if you want to take action, here's what you do. So you want to know when that critical moment is. So do you guys remember the spark lines? Anybody remember the spark line? Oh, LaShawn, you were thinking too hard on the beginning, middle, end. Yeah, I know. I said it was simple. Okay, so Nancy Duarte talks about spark lines. And it was in your reading, so I hope that you did read it. If you didn't, go ahead and check back and see what it is. And the spark line is talks about where it jumps to exciting, where we get those sparks. And the spark line tends to look really similar to the what is versus what could be drawings. Do you guys remember the what is and the what could be? LaShawn, Kayla, Tess?
Yeah.
LaShawn, kind of? Okay, so if you don't remember the what is versus what could be, you're going to want to review it. You gotta go back. Yeah, absolutely. It's critical. Because when you're trying to persuade people to take action, and in this presentation, we're trying to persuade people to invest in you and in your brand, we need to have a vision of, if they bring you on, what could be? So right now, we're talking about what is, right? Without me, this is what's going to happen. When you bring me in, this is how cool this is going to be, right? So that's that what is versus what could be. And you're going back and forth between those. And that actually fits with that meanwhile back at the ranch, right? So we've got these two parallel stories, what is versus what could be. So know when that critical moment is. We're looking for that star moment. Did anybody remember what the star moment was? You guys remember Nancy Duarte talking about this?
The moment that catches everybody's attention. The moment that... Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the star moment. Yeah, something they're always going to remember, LaShawn. Yes. So we've got this moment, and we really want to dramatically drive the big idea home. And that's the goal of this. So we're taking this star moment into each presentation. So we want it to be significant, we want it to be sincere, and we want it to magnify our big idea as opposed to distract from the big idea. So there are 5 types of star moments. So one thing that we can do to create a star moment is we can have a memorable dramatization. What do you think that might be? LaShawn is thinking. I like it. So a dramatization. We see dramatizations all the time. Where do we see dramatizations?
In movies, on stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have the benefit of using film in this, a memorable dramatization. We can personally demonstrate, right?
Right.
We can show a video of how beautiful things will be if you bring us on. Maybe that's a before and after, right? Look at the type of graphic design this company used before I came on, and then look at the difference that my work made. That could be a form of dramatization.
Confidence.
Mm-hmm. And all of these will make sure that we have confidence in there. I like that, Tess. Another type of star moment is we can think about repeatable sound bites. So, what do you think that means? What's a repeatable sound bite? We see repeatable sound bites on the news all the time. Have any of you seen any of the... Yeah, absolutely, LaShawn. LaShawn just said when you have a saying that is repeated throughout. Yeah. So one repeatable sound a repeatable sound bite could be something that you repeat. So there's a really famous speech that has a really clear repeatable sound bite. Anybody remember, or does that spark anything for anybody? In Martin Luther King's speech, what's the I have a dream? Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. So we've got this repeatable soundbite, I have a dream. You walk away and you know you're going to walk away with that soundbite that you're going to be able to repeat. So sometimes repeatable soundbites can be they can be slogans. It can be a rallying cry. It could be something that we could see in the headlines. So think about what you can put into your speech that could be a repeatable soundbite. So another type of star moment, you could include an evocative visual. So when I'm talking about evocative visuals, I'm talking about how images can become emotional links for your information. So for your star moment, you probably don't want to have a graph, but you might want to have a photograph. So we're not showing a chart, but we might show a photograph that will appeal to our audience's emotions, get their feelings in the right place, so that we can build on that. Let's see. Another type of star moment, we can have emotive storytelling. So whenever we attach emotion to a story, it makes it more memorable. Why do you guys think? LaShawn, it gives off sympathy? Yeah, absolutely. So the audience starts to feel the story with you. So why do you think if the audience feels the story with you, they're more likely to remember it? What's the why there? Yeah, because they start to relate. They start to relate, and then whenever we're feeling something in our own body, that starts to make it a little more kinesthetic. So we're getting their emotions involved, means we're actually getting their bodies involved, which is kind of crazy, right? So, emotive storytelling. And then finally, we can always use shocking statistics. So, when you have a shocking statistic, do you think if it's your star moment, are you just going to say the number and then move on?
No.
No, absolutely not, Tess, and you are right also, LaShawn. So we don't want to move on with a shocking statistic. What do we want to do?
We want to play on that idea for a minute.
Yeah.
We want, make it more a target. The fact that you're not just spitting out this statistic. You need proof of it. You need examples. You need to elaborate more on just a number.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to give examples. We're going to elaborate. I like to think of it as unpacking. So we want to unpack the statistic. And I've got an example that I'm going to show you guys later where we can see how a statistic can be unpacked. So whatever you do, we want to make sure that your star moment is not cliche, and we want to make sure that it's a worthwhile piece of information that our audience, like, it actually matters to them. We want to make sure that it's appropriate. In order to know what is appropriate, we have to know who.
The audience.
We have to know our audience. That's right, Tess. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is really going to feed into our audience. All right, so McDonald's. Can any of you think of a repeatable soundbite when you think about McDonald's?
I'm loving it.
Absolutely. All right. Evocative visuals. Yep, computer's a little slow. Okay, so we've got this image. What's this image say to you? Missing a loved one. Absolutely, LaShawn. Yeah. So does it give you any emotions?
Sadness, grief.
Sadness, grief. LaShawn, you're saying mourning. Yeah. And to me, it really, it gives me a sense of wonder. I can't quite see how that flower is growing out of I don't see where it's coming out of the marble. And so it's kind of gives me this sense of magic or wonder or something. Does that do that for anybody else? LaShawn, in a sense. It does kind of look like it was stuck in it, LaShawn. Yeah. Kayla totally gives you that sense. Yeah. And the cool thing about images is that everybody won't necessarily feel the same thing. And that's okay. But the point is that we find images that support, that we believe support the feeling and hopefully the content, but we're looking with evocative images where, especially if we're dealing with large concepts, we want things to support the feeling, the vibe, the oomph of what we're talking about, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And so adding an image can really make a story much more powerful, and it can make data much more powerful too. It's pretty fascinating. So we want to think about evocative visuals. So we've got this we've got this statistic. Can somebody, Tess, you've been talking, so can you read this out loud?
Yeah. More than 2,000 tropical forest plants have been identified by scientists as having anti-cancer properties.
Great, so we've got this quote. We've got these words. So when we see it on this page, what kind of a feeling does it give us? Like just
Hope.
this text and screen. You started to answer, Tess, and I totally cut you off.
Oh, my bad. Hope.
Okay, it gives you a feeling of hope. Awesome. LaShawn, you've got a question? Okay. Cool. So what happens when we take this quote and we pair it with this picture? What does this image add to your understanding of this quote? Does it, or does it, right? It may not.
It just shows that there's proof of work, that this is a fact, that people are trying to figure things out. They're running their tests.
Yeah, there's work involved. That's cool, and we've got some proof that this is happening. And for me, what I think is really interesting, so when I'm thinking about these tropical forest plants, the image in my head was like a fern. You know, something tiny. And then to see this guy crouching next to this massive trunk, that's cool, right? Like, look, it's like the power of nature to me. So that's kind of a cool pairing. Okay, so we also want to think about emotive storytelling. So let's take a look at a video by Susan Cain. Let's see if I can get out of this. There we go. And as we're watching, we won't watch the whole thing, but as we're watching some of this, I want you guys to think about how she uses story. So if you can hang with me for about 5 minutes, we'll get some stories in here. And Kayla, you said that sometimes the videos are jumping. This may jump again for you. So can you see that that web address?
Yeah, barely.
Here we go. So let me put it there. And now you can get it too. So we'll watch about 5 minutes.
Oh, cool.
When I was 9 years old, I went off to summer camp for the first time, and my mother packed me a suitcase full of books, which to me seemed like a perfectly natural thing to do, because in my family, reading was the primary group activity. And this might sound antisocial to you, but for us, it was really just a different way of being social. You had the animal warmth of your family sitting right next to you, but you were also free to go roaming around the adventure land inside your own mind. And I had this idea that camp was going to be just like this, but better. I had a vision of 10 girls sitting in a cabin, cozily reading books in their matching nightgowns. Camp was more like a keg party without any alcohol. And on the very first day, our counselor gathered us all together, and she taught us a cheer that she said we would be doing every day for the rest of the summer to instill camp spirit. And it went like this. R-O-W-D-I-E, that's the way we spell rowdy, 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 let's get rowdy. Yeah. So I couldn't figure out for the life of me why we were supposed to be so rowdy, or why we had to spell this word incorrectly. but I recited the cheer. I recited the cheer along with everybody else. I did my best. And I just waited for the time that I could go off and read my books. But the first time that I took my book out of my suitcase, the coolest girl in the bunk came up to me and she asked me, "Why are you being so mellow?" Mellow, of course, being the exact opposite of ROWDIE. And then the second time I tried it, the counselor came up to me with a concerned expression on her face, and she repeated the point about camp spirit and said we should all really work very hard to be outgoing. And so I put my books away, back in their suitcase, and I put them under my bed, and there they stayed for the rest of the summer. And I felt kind of guilty about this. I felt as if the books needed me somehow, and they were calling out to me, and I was forsaking them. But I did forsake them, and I didn't open that suitcase again until I was back home with my family at the end of the summer. Now, I tell you this story about summer camp. I could have told you 50 others just like it. All the times that I got the message that somehow my quiet and introverted style of being was not necessarily the right way to go, and that I should be trying to pass as more of an extrovert. And I always sensed deep down that this was wrong, and that introverts were pretty excellent just as they were. But for years, I denied this intuition. And so I became a Wall Street lawyer, of all things, instead of the writer that I had always longed to be, partly because I needed to prove to myself that I could be bold and assertive too. And I was always going off to crowded bars when I really would have preferred to just have a nice dinner with friends. And I made these self-negating choices so reflexively that I wasn't even aware that I was making them. Now, this is what many introverts do, and it's our loss for sure, but it is also...
All right, so did you guys, what'd you guys notice about the emotive storytelling? Did she use it? LaShawn, you can totally relate to her. Yeah, me too. Yeah? So LaShawn, how'd she use emotive storytelling? What happened? Is there like a specific moment where you like, ooh, I feel her. I get this. By using her story? Was there a specific part of the story? Growing up in camp? Yeah. Tess, Kayla, was there a specific moment of the story that you started to feel involved?
Really, when she started talking about the whole introvert extrovert deal.
Mm-hmm.
I see that and use those words a lot.
Awesome. So when she brought the story to a point, you started to really...
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. So you guys have both brought up... Oh, LaShawn. So you're saying... When she said she always thought she had to be an extrovert. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So she's got this moment where she makes this realization that she was pushing herself aside and being this thing. And that's something that I bet everybody can relate to in some part of their life, right? And Kayla, you're saying, huh?
Something.
Say it again.
Adolescence. Something.
Adolescence, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Tess, you started to really connect with her when she started saying the spelling of the word being wrong. Absolutely, yeah. That's great. So she tells a story that gets us emotionally involved, helps us understand her world. And did you notice that she was really specific in her details? Anybody notice that? Yeah. So when she was really specific with her details, did that make you feel less connected to her or more connected? More. Awesome. Okay, so what I see happen a lot with folks when they start to use stories in their speeches, they use stories and they want to connect to as many people as possible. And so the default is they make things as broad as possible. But it's funny because it's a thing that actually backfires. When you are really broad, it's really hard to connect with you at all. But when you include really specific details, all of a sudden I can see your world, and then I can compare my world because your world has gotten so specific. Okay, so we get to make those comparisons when you are specific with your stories. So think about that. Okay, we can also use these shocking statistics. So this is a moment, you guys remember Steve Jobs?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is really cool. He uses a quote here, or a statistic here. He tells us we are selling over 5 million songs a day. But he doesn't just give us that statistic and move on. What does he do?
He elaborates.
He elaborates. He actually reacts. Do you see that? He says, we are selling over 5 billion songs a day now. And then he goes, isn't that unbelievable? 5 million songs a day. Yeah, LaShawn, you're totally right. It makes it exciting. He reacts. He gives us time to react. And then he kind of shows us his own reaction. He's going, holy shit, that's crazy. Right? So it's exciting. And then he unpacks it even more. Do you guys see what he does next? He says, that's 58 songs every second of every minute of every hour of every day. So Steve Jobs gave us a shocking statistic. Then Steve Jobs reacted to the shocking statistic. He repeated the shocking statistic. And then finally, he gave us a way to understand that shocking statistic in our everyday life. So when he talks about 58 songs of every second, of every minute, of every hour, of every day, we can start to visualize what that actually means in our lives. Like we can start to think, ooh, how long does it take me to download one song? How long does it take me to download 2? When was the last time I downloaded 10 songs? And then he's going, whoa, 58 in a second. So we have a moment where we can use shocking statistics to be our star moment. But if we're going to use a shocking statistic for our star moment, we want to unpack it similar to the way Steve Jobs unpacked this statistic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Great.
You have to give a little at a time.
Yeah, you really do, Tess. You have to give us just a chunk. Because that statistic he gave us was huge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It takes me time to figure out what the heck 5 million means. I don't see 5 million, like I can't count to 5 million, right? I mean, I probably could, but I never have.
That would take a lot of time.
It would. Yeah. So putting these numbers into perspective really makes a huge difference for your audience. It helps us go with you. It helps us respond in the way you want us to respond. So now we're going to talk about the 3 pillars of public speaking. So the first one, we're talking about ethos. Does this sound familiar to anybody? LaShawn, yes, absolutely, excellent. Anybody remember what ethos is? I said that before I realized it was written on the screen. Do you remember what it is? Yeah, so ethos. And then we've got pathos. And then we have logos. So ethos, pathos, and logos. And we want to make sure that we are weaving all of these together to create our presentation. So when we're talking about ethos, we're talking about credibility. So anytime we're connecting with our audience, anytime we're helping them relate to us, anytime we tell them about themselves in a really specific way that is right, then that is reinforcing our credibility. We want to do that. Also, anytime we cite things. So, another way that we generate ethos is we tell people about ourselves. We give them our credentials. We tell them how long we've worked with a certain program. Maybe you're talking about Photoshop, and then you can say, I've worked professionally with Photoshop for the past 10 years. That gives you a little bit of cred. I'm going to believe some things that you say about Photoshop after you say you've worked with it for 10 years. So, ethos, credibility, it has to do with how well we know our audience. It has well with whether our audience respects our credentials. And ethos also has to do with whether our audience whether they feel like you have their best interest in mind. Have you guys ever watched an infomercial?
Yes.
So do you?
I watched
Yeah.
the Magic Bullet religiously.
Awesome. So have you ever seen an infomercial that made you feel like, oof, this person does not have my best interest in mind?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So maybe it's not the Magic Bullet one, because it sounds like that one really relates to you. Okay? So we don't want to be like that oily salesman in the corner, right? We want to be somebody who has our audience's best situation at heart. We really want them to be the best that they can be. And that goes along with Nancy Duarte's framing of the speaker's role as being the mentor, right?
Right.
Yeah, so here I'm the mentor, I'm here to help you, I'm here, and so ethos. Why am I credible to be your mentor right now? Well, this is my cred. What do we have in common, right? So how are we the same? This is how we're the same. Answering those questions. So not asking those questions to your audience. You don't want to say, hey guys, how are we the same? You want to say, hey, this right here is what makes us the same. Okay, so we've got pathos. So pathos is dealing with emotion and empathy. So we're thinking about the words that we're choosing. And do our words evoke feelings of love? Do they provoke feelings of sympathy? Are they provoking feelings of fear? We really want to think about the emotion and the empathy that our words are creating. And then finally, we're bringing logic into this. And so by bringing in the logic, that logos, we are absolutely appealing to facts. We're appealing to if-then scenarios. If you drop a ceramic coffee cup on the tile, then it will break, right? So we're appealing to these, and that is a logical conclusion. If this happens, then this will happen. So following those logical sequences. But here's the deal, is a speech that only has one of these things isn't really going to work that well. And a speech that only has two isn't going to be the best speech either. But when you can get all of these three to work together, you're really setting yourself up for success. So we're establishing credibility, we're showing we're the same, we're getting people's emotions involved, and we're appealing to people's logic. So here is a model of communication. And so this model of communication, it's a pretty simple model. So first we're looking at the sender. So the sender has this idea. And then the sender wants to get this idea to the receiver. So when we're looking at this model, are we seeing that that original idea goes psychically and unchanged to the receiver?
No.
No, not at all. So the sender has to, this says transmission. I've seen other models that say encode, right? So we've got, a lot of times I think in pictures. So I get a picture in my head, but I can't psychically transmit this picture to somebody, so I have to describe the image, right? So
Right.
I'm taking this picture, and now I'm encoding it into words. Okay, so I'm seeing a sun, and I'm seeing the sun is setting, and I'm seeing these colors, and so we have to, and naming all of those things, right? So
Right.
whenever we are encoding an idea, there are other things that are getting in the way. The way I choose to describe that sunset is colored by my personal experiences, my personal expectations of what a sunset should be, and my personal preference of sunsets, all of those things. So that at the top there where it says bias noise, all of that happens as I am crafting the words for me to describe that sunset. On the reception of that sunset, you see the receiver going through the exact same thing. So the receiver is hearing the words that I'm saying, sunset, the sun, it's golden, it's going down, it's falling below the hills. So all of the words that I'm choosing are being received by the receiver, but in that process of receiving, they have to decode that message. And as they're decoding the message, they're unpacking it based on their own experiences, their own biases, their own expectations, their culture, their values. All of these things go into how I choose words and how the people who hear them choose to interpret those words. So we want to think about that as we are crafting our messages. We also want to think about the other things that are listed here. We're thinking about credibility noise, we're thinking about semantic noise, we're thinking about experiential noise. So credibility noise, we've got this message, but we've also got the credibility of the speaker, and they kind of speak simultaneously. And they don't necessarily say the same thing, but we kind of want them to, right? So how do we reduce the credibility noise? If the credibility is in sync with the message, it's not going to be quite as noisy. It's not going to distort, right? It's not going to give a static. It's going to support the message. If the credibility contrasts with the message that you're saying, it'll be harder to hear your message. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right. We can also think about semantic noises. So the examples that we choose to share, the words we choose to express. We want to choose the examples and the words that will be most appropriate for our audience. So they may not be the examples or the words that we like the most, or the examples or the words that we really think are the funniest or the things we like to tell. But we do want to choose the examples in the words that our audience is going to respond to in order to reduce the semantic noise. We're looking for that common ground, right? And then experiential Oh, and another part of semantic noise is you want to think about your use of jargon. So when we use jargon they're words that are within an industry, and sometimes jargon is great, it can be a shortcut, and sometimes jargon actually serves to alienate people. So I just got out of grad school, and I was studying experimental theater, and I was reading a lot of theory. So if you ever talk to somebody who is really in the middle of grad school, you will probably think that they are talking like a jerk, right? Because they are using all of these words that you don't necessarily know. But the reason they're doing that, they're speaking in jargon. They're speaking in the words that they are using in grad school, and it's this tiny little group of people who are all using these same words. And when they get out into the real world, they forget to reduce their jargon. Now, the consequence of that is it actually ends up alienating people. We don't want to alienate our audience, so you want to be careful about using jargon. So we also want to think about experiential noise. So the speaker's delivery makes a difference, and also the venue is going to create a difference. So experiential noise, if the presentation goes on too long, that's going to distract from your presentation. If the speaker is unprepared or the speaker is unrehearsed, that's going to create some static in your presentation. If your environment is poor, that will also make it hard to listen to your presentation. The nice thing is, as you are presenting a speech, you actually have a lot of control over a lot of these things. So any questions about this right here? Any questions about how this relates to the presentation that you're going to develop? LaShawn, isn't it best to just keep jargon out? Yeah, I believe that it is. Sometimes there are vocabulary that you have to use. So what do you think you need to do if there's a vocabulary word you have to use, but you're not sure if your audience is going to know it? What do you think you do? LaShawn, you can use your thesaurus, but you're the speaker. You need to know what the word means. Oh, you can use a thesaurus. Yeah, absolutely, and find a different word. But let's say you have this word, you have to use this word. What can you do in your speech to help the audience know what the word means?
You give out context clues.
Yeah, Tess, you can absolutely give out context clues. Yes, and then there's one more thing you can do. LaShawn, you can explain it to your best ability. You are totally right. We can give definitions in the middle of our speeches. You totally can. If we're talking about a thesaurus, you can say, so I got out my thesaurus. It's this awesome book that gives me 5 different words that mean almost the same thing as the word that I was trying to use. Right? We can toss in those definitions, and they can help people get on the same page, and that's really an awesome thing to do. All right, so we want to think about your first impressions. What do you guys think about this quote? What does this quote mean to you? Kayla, what does this quote mean to you? LaShawn, you're saying how you, the quote talks about how you present yourself? Yes, it totally does. Absolutely. So, do you remember what your first impression was of me the first time you saw this class? Or do you remember what your impression was the first time you, on like, think about it like an in-classroom class. Do you remember what your impression was of your classmates and your teachers on the first day? I looked like a nice lady. Thanks, LaShawn. I like it. What were you saying, Tess?
I went to school with the same kids since kindergarten, so there really wasn't any mystery there.
So you don't necessarily remember the first day. What, did you ever get new kids in your class?
Very few. Maybe like 5.
Do you remember the first day they showed up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's such a surprise, because there's a new person. A new, shiny new thing.
Do you remember what your first impressions were, your first thoughts were about those people?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was on the first day. And you remember them.
First impression is a lasting impression.
It absolutely is. The first impression is the impression that we're going to remember. It's the impression that your audience is going to remember. So what that means, I mean, what do you think that means? We're thinking about the content of our speech. We're thinking about the beginning and the middle and the end. What do you think that says about the beginning of your speech? LaShawn, yeah, absolutely. How you start your story. So how you start your story is going to make a huge difference. We will remember the first thing that you say. We will remember whether you were confident about the first thing that you said. We will remember whether you looked at us. So all of those things, that first time you appear, that's what we remember. So first impressions are huge. LaShawn, you're saying I'm remembering the lady and her suitcase of books. Where are you remembering that from? Oh, that's right. Yes, from the video we just saw. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, she had a suitcase and she had these books. And that sticks. That first impression. So, when you're introducing yourself, audiences are looking for similarities and they're looking for differences. The audience is also trying to create, so you want to create this common identity between you and the people that you want to influence. So when the audience is seeing you, this is just in their nature. They're sizing you up. So you want to make sure that you make those similarities really stand out, and you want to make those differences as clear as possible. And that way we can pass through this phase quickly. And it can be a little less painful, right? In order for you to focus on creating that common identity, things that you can do, you can be upbeat, you can be engaged, you can shake hands, ask questions before you begin, and really trying to create this sense that you can come off as carefree and warm and not cold and aloof. So we don't want our audience to think of us as cold and aloof. So we've got a couple of different pictures here. Which one? Which of these men would you like to be your teacher?
None.
Huh?
The one on the far left.
So the guy in the striped shirt?
Back. The one in the middle.
The one in the middle?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because there's a background. There shows he's well traveled.
Okay. Cool. So it's like what are the assumptions we make about the first guy in the striped shirt?
He looks too excited.
Too excited? Okay. What else? LaShawn, you said he seems is that uptight? He seems uptight. Okay. What about the guy on the far right? The guy in the Happy New Year hat. So, what do we think about this guy? Tess, you were talking and I talked again. You say what you were saying.
He doesn't seem serious. He is wearing a Happy New Year hat, which typically indicates intoxication. And you can't really take that seriously in a classroom setting.
Right. Kayla, you're saying he's a party guy. Tess, you're saying the same thing. Absolutely. He's having too much fun. That's right, LaShawn. So, if we're looking at these guys and we're looking for similarities, maybe you remember a time you wore a New Year's hat and you're thinking about that moment. But it might also have been a time that you were intoxicated. And so you have these associations. So it comes back to your experiences, your biases, and all of those things we just talked about. So appearance, all of a sudden, makes a huge difference in how we're perceiving this guy. So these are all pictures of the same person. And yet they're giving off these incredibly different messages. And as you are working, so the next 2 weeks, we're going to be working on drafts, and we're going to be working on second drafts and third drafts. So I want to repeat something it's a personal philosophy of mine. And it's really a philosophy that this class is also built on. There's always room for improvement. So on the one hand, I expect you to put an incredible amount of work into your first draft. So any of the feedback that you got on the planning, I expect you to answer all of those questions. I expect your first draft to be incredibly well thought out. I expect you to treat your first draft like it is the final draft. Now, after you've submitted that, you will be getting feedback. I do not believe that any piece of written or creative material, it's not ever perfect. And so, everybody will get feedback. Everybody will get thoughts or questions or ideas on how they might improve, how they might make their message more clear, how they might communicate to their audience more effectively. And the only way we start to really understand how an audience really reacts, the way that we start to understand that is by getting reactions from many different people. So your feedback as we proceed is going to be invaluable to your peers. It's not just about what the teacher thinks, it's really about what other people in your audience are perceiving. People who have different experiences, people who have different biases, people who have different preferences. We want that feedback. So when you are responding to somebody, we're using this RISE model for feedback. You never want to give a RISE model for feedback that says, hey, what you did was perfect, couldn't be better, done. Right? Because there is always room for improvement. So if you can't even figure out what could be better, start to ask questions. Start to think about the questions you have about what they put up. Ask the questions. Maybe it's something that they can actually clarify. Start to share your impressions. Wow, this made me think about this, and then it made me think about this. Maybe your reaction is exactly what they wanted. That's great information. Maybe your reaction is exactly what they didn't want. That's also great information, right? Because we want to know what the effect of our message is on the audience that is receiving it. So, as we're giving feedback, I want you guys to think about that. Moving on to question time. Do you guys have any questions about the assignment this week? By this point, I hope you've all taken a look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You've looked at it, Tess. Kayla and LaShawn, have you guys looked at it? LaShawn, you did. Excellent. Kayla, excellent. I like it. How are you guys? Have you started to work on it? LaShawn, you still need some help? Okay. Tess, have you started to work on it yet?
I've done a lot of research and written down some stuff so far. I haven't put it all together in one big fell swoop yet, though.
Uh-huh. Okay. So do you guys have any questions? Because the truth is that if you guys have questions, the likelihood that your classmates have questions is probably 100%. And many people often have the same questions. So if we can answer questions here together, this is a good place to do that. So any questions so far? LaShawn, you just want help. I get it. I get it. You too, Kayla. All right. So, if you want help and you don't have specific questions, what do you guys think you can do to get the help? So a great thing to do is to make sure that you call me. You gotta reach out to me, absolutely. There is no way for me to know that you are having an issue if you don't tell me. If we were in a classroom together, and if I could see your face, I could probably start to understand that something was going on and you weren't quite getting it. But I can't see you guys' faces, and we are across the internet from each other. So really do make sure that you give me a call. So I gave you guys on the announcement, did you see the announcement with my Google Voice number? LaShawn, you saw it? Excellent. Tess, did you see my Google Voice number?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Kayla, go ahead and look back at some of the old announcements. I sent a phone number that you guys can reach me at. The phone number that is on my profile, it's a full sale number, and I don't actually know who you reach when you call that, but you don't reach me. So don't call that number, but please do call my Google Voice number. So here's the deal with the Google Voice. I screen my calls, and what that means is you are going to call the number, you're going to leave a message, and if you leave a message, I will call you back. If you don't leave a message, I won't call you back because I don't know who you are, and sometimes weird people get my phone number and I screen the phone calls. So if you call me, leave a message. If I'm available, I'll call you immediately. If I'm not available, I'll call you back when I can. Sound fair?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And I love talking about your projects, and sometimes the best way to figure stuff out is to talk it through with somebody. And it's okay to call me more than once. It's okay to have a question on Wednesday and then have another question on Thursday. Totally fine. Totally fine. Ideally, I will be available during my office hours. I'll pick up the phone right then. But in general, I suggest if you have a question, call me as long as it's not. I would say don't call after 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes I'm asleep by 10. I'm old. So don't call after 10. Sometimes I'm awake by 7 o'clock in the morning. You can probably call by then. As long as you don't mind a little gravel voice. Yeah. So you're going to get opportunities to improve. That's the reason we're doing a rough draft and a second draft. Ask me questions. And I really like helping you guys. So don't throw that away. All right. So I talked a lot. Did you guys have any more questions that were specific that we can share with the masses here? I am hearing silence, so I'm guessing that's
Not
no.
right now.
Not right now? Cool.
Yeah, not at the moment.
Okay. Cool. As you work, you may have questions. Go ahead and reach out to me. All right, guys. So that is the lecture for today. I'm really looking forward to see what you guys put together. Cool. All right. Have a lovely evening, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks, LaShawn. All right. I'm hanging up, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.